So this is what we discussed last time. Another point, remember in the example which we took last week, the resources which I took were physical, tangible resources, and the output which we produced, which we saw, were also tangible, clothing and food. But we are living in this day and age where research and development, innovation, intellectual property, invention, discoveries, innovations are very, very important. So therefore, one important factor these days, as we say that the 21st century is a century of basically intangibles, because we say it's an age of information. And what is information? Information is a very important resource, but it's an intangible resource. And that, believe me if you can, has changed the fate of several countries. For example, I can talk about India. India, until 91, was a kind of socialist country, very, very backward looking and, not very progressive, to be honest. And then in the 91, there was a change of leadership. People were more progressive, more forward looking. They were not afraid of foreign trade, that these multinational companies will come and will make us a slave again. No, they were far more open. They were far more going to discuss on the equal terms. And then this IT revolution changed the country's fate for good. And suddenly a country which was given all type of names become a hot destination for all the multinational foreign direct investment. And that credit goes to the increase, the shift upwards of the production possibility curve, thanks to a very important resource called IT, the information technology. So resources are not just physical. These days, the non-physical resources probably are more important than the physical resources. As I said, that this age is all about knowledge, information. Some companies, I was looking at the strategy report of PwC, the PricewaterhouseCoopers, is a very famous consultancy firm. I know many of you know about it. Sometimes they say that they make some kind of remorse that as the cost pressure increases, companies spend less. You see what? This curve will shift static upwards, or will remain static, or will even come down. Remember, don't ever think that this curve will always go upwards. If you don't make proper progress, if you don't make good policy, good plan, this can come down in the future as well. Your resources can go down. You see, we have, in many countries, water is so scarce these days. Agricultural land you'd never get, and the quality of soil has gone down. So in a way, it's quite possible that, and similarly, even if you produce fantastic human resources, if there's brain drain, they no longer remain in the country. So despite your best of intentions and best of your vision, there is no guarantee that this curve will always go this side. It can even come downwards as well. And this is what happens. This is what happens with the companies, especially, that whenever there's a crisis like we are undergoing these days, the companies think that it's a good idea to save money. And to save money, they can, the first whip is on the research and development. They say, hey, you know what, there's no need to do innovation. Let's put it on back burner for some time. Let's put it on hold for the next few years. Let the things get better, and then we go for further spending. But then they are shooting in the foot, basically. Because you need research and development, not only to grow further, but also to remain constant. Do you get my point? Because if you don't do the R&D, if you don't innovate, if you don't develop your new channels, new intangibles, then there's a danger that the curve actually will fall down. Okay, So therefore, the companies must realize that in every thick and thin, bad times, good times, they need to make sure that the certain innovation and that continues. I don't blame the company leader sometimes, not fully, because the modern companies are so big and so complex that the shareholders' pressure sometimes goes deep, and the CEOs have to surrender to the aspirations of the shareholders. Are you aware of that? The company is owned by shareholders, but the company is controlled by the managers. Which managers? Everyone whose designations start with the C. And who is the first C? The Chief Executive Officer, the CEO. And then you have the CFO, CMO, and all those designations with C. They are the top managers. They control the company, but they may not own the company. But then there is a large number of people scattered all over the world. They can be the owners of the company, but they're not controller of the company. But the owners have a voting right, right? So whenever there's a decision, the strategic decision, the owners, the shareholders can cast their vote in favor or against certain move, certain motion. So therefore, the managers are always somewhat, you can say that, they want to please the shareholders. Sometimes the same thing is done by the politicians. Politicians sometimes do things to please people, but not to make them aware. I was talking to a professor of finance who is also into politics, and I asked him this question: that how do you differentiate between a politician and a statesman? Do you know these two words? Have you heard? I'm sure you have heard the word politician and statesman also. He said that the politicians, they try to fulfill the wishes of people. And the statesmen tell people, teach people, guide people what to wish. Do you understand the idea? So therefore, it's very important that the people who lead the company, they also should be so influential that they are able to guide the shareholders what is good and what is bad for the company, not just following their wishes. But the sad truth is that in the real life, the top CEOs, they always buckle down the pressure of the shareholders. The problem is that if you don't listen to the shareholders, they can threaten you that, you know what, if you don't listen to us, we would sell our shares in the market. And what happens when the large number of shares are sold in the market, what happens then? What happens to share prices? The price go down, and the company may lose its existence. Well, the company loses or doesn't lose is a different thing, but CEO will definitely lose his job. This is what I was discussing with students on the other day, that if you look at typical Anglo-Saxon, American style of corporate, the hire and fire is so straightforward. An average mid-cap American CEO, you know what his salary a year, his annual total pay package? It's about $30 million plus. They average the 30 million plus they get. Do you want to have this kind of job where you have 30 million a year? Is it a good job, or you want more? You want more? Who wants more? How much more? Yeah. So, but at the same time, they can be fired very easily as well. Whereas in the European companies, the salary is low in comparison to, I would say that many European top, the top companies, their CEOs are getting less money than the middle-sized American companies CEO get. Because it's very common, it's a very cultural thing that in America, there's no limit. but then there's no job security either. Here in Europe, I think the labor laws are far more stricter, and that applies somewhat to CEOs as well. But if you see the compensation which the CEOs get in Europe is not as much as the CEOs in Europe gets, even though even in the recent past, the CEOs in European companies, they are getting more money. So there's more Americanization of top managers' compensation policy, I would say. Right? But still, whatever is the situation, they are afraid of the shareholders. And I want to give you an example here. There was a very famous study published by Graham in 2005. It's an old study, but things haven't changed. In fact, things have gone even worse than that time. This gentleman, he had a survey of top 100 companies which are listed in the US. So you can imagine that these can be maybe in the Forbes list or whichever list. So these are the top American companies. And what they said is very interesting. They said that 78% of the managers surveyed admit to sacrificing long-term value. So the idea is that the pressure of the shareholder is so strong that even if they have a long-term project, they will not take it. They will take up those projects which are producing quick money, in the short period. Why? Because the shareholders want quick money. To be fair to the managers, if you are selected as a top CEO, the CEO of a company, would you like to work it for 1 year, 6 months, or would you like to have a career there? You would like to have a career. But if you look at the shareholders, they don't have any commitment with the company. Today, they are with one company. They're waiting for the share prices to go up. When they go up, they go away. That's it. So then what happens? The managers are always in a pressure to keep the shareholders calm. And then what they have to do, they have to listen. And at the behest of the shareholders, they have to undergo the projects which are very myopic, very short term. We have a problem called myopia, which means short-sightedness. So they are 78%. I'm not talking about SMEs. I'm talking about the top 100 American companies. 78% so 78 top CEO, CFO are saying that the pressure of the shareholder is so strong on us that if we have a choice to have a long-term project, which will have cost for 5 years, but the return will come after 5 years, but it will be so good for the company. Situation X, situation Y, just do some short-term projects, get the money, give to the shareholders and make them happy. They say that 78% times we would go for the short-term projects. If this is the situation of the top American companies, which are leading the world, you can imagine what happens in SME's case. What happens in case of a startup? What happens in case of those companies which are only in the stage of ideation stage? So therefore, the existing, I would say, the existing system somewhat is responsible. Scarcity is also one factor. The resources are scarce, and we have to make use of what to do, what not to do. When you produce something, you also decide what not to produce, because you can't produce everything. Why? Because the resources are limited, and this gives birth to the idea of opportunity cost. The opportunity cost, your time was limited. You could come here, you could be at home, you chose to come here. So the opportunity cost of studying this economics lesson is the sleep or the free time you sacrifice. You can't have both, unfortunately. So the basic, because of in this background, you can also think about that. What are the three basic problems in economics? What to produce? Should you produce necessities which are catering to the needs of millions and billions of people? Or should you make some products which are helping the rich people to enjoy their luxurious lifestyle? What to produce? How to produce? How to produce? That's very important. Imagine there is a country with abundance of labor because the population is massive there. And this country chooses to employ capital intensive techniques. Remember that we have two broad categories of technologies philosophically. One is called labor intensive, which means for the given amount of technology, machinery, we use more labor. Why? Because that labor can get job, right? The other form is that we have the capital intensive technology. In many OECD countries, in the developed countries, because of less population, the technology is often called capital intensive technology, which means for the given amount of people, we use more machinery, more equipment, more all other paraphernalia. So it's very important that the country decides not only what to produce, but also how to produce. Just imagine a situation, a country is fully populated, lots of people in the country, and the leaders, they say, you know what, we want to have economic development, let's computerize, let's make things electrified, mechanized, right? What will happen? I know I'm not undermining the importance of these measures, but at least for the short period, there'll be huge number of people who will become unemployed. So therefore, as a good economic planner, you need to decide what to produce, but you also need to decide how would you produce and for whom to produce. Do you want to produce guns or roses? Do you want to produce those basic amenities, or do you want to open the luxurious hotels or some holiday home and villas and all that stuff? So these are the things which, even though they look very simple, they look very straightforward, but their answers lie in a very complex propositions. Because remember that economics is a discipline, but people who make economic decisions, they're not very free. They have so many political compulsions. And this is why sometimes you have to swallow the bitter pill knowingly. You get my point? The problem with the modern day economic system is that it's overridden by the politicians. So that's why, even though these things are so straightforward, but I wish they were so straightforward in terms of implementation. This we have done, this we have done, this we have done. Yeah, this is something more I want to discuss with you. It's called positive or normative. Did we discuss positive or normative economics? I think we did last week. So we quickly go through. Yeah, this is something which is a new concept, need. A need is a psychological phenomenon. If there's no need, there is no economy, there's no production, there's no distribution, there's no price, there is no supply, there's no demand. So the whole thing comes from the need. Need is like, how to say, it's like a necessity, is the mother of invention. Need is the mother of economic system. There's no need to education. You don't feel the need to get educated. What will happen? You will not come here. No university, no teachers, no books, no library, no innovation, no projects, no thesis, no research, no knowledge creation. And then we basically go back to the Stone Ages. So the knowledge, the need could be individual. It could be micro level. Not everybody has the same needs. Some people want to have the need and urge to get educated because they're so go-getter type of people. They have a itch in their head all the time that, you know what, I have some mission, I have some agenda, I need to fulfill it. Some people go with the flow. So the need varies individually, and the need also varies collectively. We have a collective character of countries. We know some countries, they were bombed. They were even attempted to be decimated from the scene of the planet Earth. They came back, and they came as an economic superpower. So the idea is that there's a national character. In some countries, corruption is almost acceptable. In some countries, corruption is a very big thing. So we have the way we think, the way we have our needs and our aspiration. It's not only individual. You can find the most honest people in a very corrupt country, and you can find very corrupt people in a very honest country at the same time. So we have the individual characters, and we also have the collective characters also. So the needs, same way, could be individual and can also be at a more macro level or more societal level or more aggregated level. Is my idea clear to you? But overall, the needs depend on level of education. More you get educated, more needs you feel. More you start thinking differently. There are many things which were beyond your comprehension, and now you start thinking. Communication and media has played a big role. More open the societies are. Those countries which are living in a very close the iron wall, the iron curtain, they don't feel the exposure to the rest of the world. And then thus their needs are suppressed, limited. But once they come in contact with the global world, the global society, the open society, they start thinking differently, and thus their needs also change. For example, if I have to name a country, USSR, when it was a country where there was a very strict regime and everything. But slowly what happened when this country was getting exposure to the rest of the world? What happens then? The whole idea, the whole outlook changed. Economic growth. Needs cause economic growth, and more economic growth causes more needs. Remember, economics is not a linear, cyclical relation that, hey, this is the arrow tail and this is the arrowhead. No, it doesn't work like this. It's always like a, circular thing. Economic growth leads to more needs, and more needs lead to economic growth. So it works like this, and this applies to all the points also. With the level of education, there is more needs, more economic growth, and with the more economic growth, there is a more demand for education. Technological development is also one important factor. I will say least about it. Want, needs and want. Want. What is the difference between the need and a want? Okay, I've flowed some points, and let's do some exercise. And listen carefully, the words I'm using. Needs, wish, want, demand. Let's focus on desire / wish, one thing, wants, the second thing, and demand, the third thing. What do you think is the difference? Any idea? Yes. But when we come to the economic literature, we have some more, even though you're right, but we try to phrase them differently. Let me explain it. If one day you think, I wish I become the Prime Minister, I wish I become Secretary General of UNO, I wish I become the CEO of Microsoft. Which word are you using? Are you saying, I want that I become the CEO of Microsoft? Or you say, I wish? Huh? You wish. It means that the wish, desire, is something which maybe it's like, I won't be undermining your emotions by saying that it's like a daydreaming, but it's, or a night dreaming, whatever you call it, but something which you only visualize, you dream of, right? Dream is very important. Unless you dream, you can never achieve it. But wish is something where you're not really prepared to go for, to fulfillment of your desire. But then you make efforts. And now you have the resources. You have the resources that resources mean capability, qualification, experience, that you can put your candidature as a CEO of Microsoft. Then the wish becomes want. So probably now you're on the board of directors of Microsoft. And when there's a discussion about choosing the new CEO and they're asking for the application, who can be the best applicant, you put your CV in front and you say, oh, hey, guess I have all the resources, I have all the capabilities to become the CEO. When you file your application. Now, this is not a daydreaming. This is a serious attempt to fulfill your dream. This is called want. And when this becomes fulfilled, it becomes a demand. So let me put it this way. There is a child. The school is very far away. And the child wants to be educated, but he or she has to walk maybe 5 kilometers to school, and it's winter, summer, very difficult. The child dreams, I wish I have a bicycle. This is only a wish. And now the child is saving money, also convincing parents that, you know what, I think I seriously need a bike. And now a stage has come when either child's pocket money saving or the parents' willingness to give him or her money is, now there is money. This become a want. And now when both parents and child giving a last thought, hey, are we now going to buy the bike? We go to the market, carrying money in the bag, and then in turn bringing the bike home, then it becomes a demand. So even though these words are very much sounding synonyms, but there is a conceptual difference between desire, wish, or desire and wish is same thing, want and demand. Microeconomics is basically that branch of economics in which we study an individual firm, individual person, individual industry or sector. So it's like very individual, one person at a time, one firm at a time. That is called microeconomics. How does the price get determined in the market? How you fix the cost, and where's the equilibrium? So these are some decisions that we do with the microeconomics. Micro means very minute. So when you are analyzing a firm or an industry very minutely, for example, what is the income of this person? What is the profit of Nokia? How much investment has been made by Finnair? How many people deposited money in Nordea? These are microeconomic questions. Why? Because here we are only considering one entity. If I say, how many deposits have come in the entire banking system in Finland? Then it becomes a macroeconomic question. Because what is the opposite of micro? Macro, which means broader. I buy, let's say, let me put it this way, let's say 5 liters of milk a week. What is the total consumption of milk in Finland? Then it becomes a macro question. So when we are aggregating people, when we are aggregating companies, when we are aggregating industries, it becomes a macroeconomic phenomenon. Micro is when we are only focusing on one person, or, for example, the price you charge for different products vary across different products. Yeah, it's a microeconomic thing. The cost which each company has varies. It's a micro thing. So micro and macro. There's always a confusion. Something could be good in micro, but the same thing can be bad in macro. I think I told you once that you all have certain amount of income and you save it. Some income you save. Is it good or bad? It's good. Should you save more? Saving is good. But if everybody starts saving, that there is more saving in the country, then the problem is that there'll be less consumption. And if there's less consumption, why would somebody invest in the country? So the idea is that something can be very beneficial at the micro level, but it won't be so beneficial at the macro level. So it's very important that you understand this, mechanism. Efficiencies. There's certain type of efficiencies and inefficiencies also we need to keep in mind. In economics, we broadly have two categories of efficiencies. The first efficiency is called productive efficiency. The productive efficiency is very simple. I want to produce the goods at the minimum possible cost. The average cost of production should be as less as possible. Why so? Why do you want to produce goods at the least cost? Sorry? Yeah, this more, but which benefit you get? If you produce the goods at the least cost, the minimum cost, what benefit do you get? Cost. Yeah. Very good point. So the lady has said that why we're so obsessed with production of each item at the minimum cost is that this will widen the gap between the price you get and the cost you pay, the profits increase, and this is good for the company. But wait a sec, why didn't I write here production of each item at minimum cost and selling at the maximum revenue? You get my point? If I go by your argument, you are saying that if the cost is a minimum, then the gap between the price, the revenue, and cost will go widen, and that's what we want. We want that the gap between the revenue and cost should be big, which means we have bigger profits. But you understand my point? I didn't say that production of each item at maximum revenue. Why I said only minimum cost? Why didn't I say maximum revenue? Yes. Yeah. But why can't I sell at more price? Okay, imagine my cost is up. I'm not able to have the minimum cost. But then I say, hey, I couldn't minimize my cost, but can I sell at a maximum price? The gap is still big between the revenue and cost. But you have a very good point. Look, I put it simple number. Imagine your cost is 2 euros. And this is the minimum cost, 2 euros. The price you charge in the market is 5. How much is the profit? 3, right? Imagine you are an inefficient producer and your cost jumps from 2 to 4. Can you still have 3 euros profit? Why can't? Just raise the price to 7. Because if you have the price 7, cost is 4, profit is still 3.
Result in less demand.
Fantastic, because first of all, you can only control the cost, not the price. In the modern day, the prices of goods, same good, produced by different companies, the margin of gap, the gap between the price differences is so less. You can't, one company can't sell this marker for 2 euros and the second company sell for 6 euros. No, there can be maybe 2 euros and 10 cents, perhaps. The margin, the gap, and the reason is that if you raise the price, then you will become incompetitive in the market. Nobody will buy things from you. And if nobody buys from you, you will be out of business. But you have a control over your cost. You can only control the cost, but you cannot control the price, always. You can control the price for some time, as long as you're a monopolist. As long as you are a monopolist. Monopolist means? Who's monopolist? Any idea? Somebody who has a full control. Yeah. Look at what has happened to the countries which were controlled economies. Controlled economies mean everything was produced by the state and no private sector was allowed to participate in the economy. Over there, you could, even if the cost was more, you could push the price even up and get the profits. But that was causing inefficiencies. And what happened? The system collapsed. In the free market economy, we have a system in which you cannot charge the price what you wish to, but you can reduce the cost with your better management, better organization, with the better technology, with the new inputs, and so on and so forth. You can minimize your wastage and you can maximize your efficiency. I think I told you when I was working for Marks and Spencer in Britain, and if we used to do the night fill job because I was studying there during the daytime. And if I and my colleagues, we have less than 10 boxes of garments filled in 1 hour, next day we were summoned by our line manager. How on earth you set the shop by less than 10 boxes? But these kind of accountability, these kind of economic discipline was absolutely missing when the countries used to be more or less monopolist. Now we rarely see monopoly, very rarely. Is monopoly always bad? Is an example of good monopoly? You see any good example of a monopoly? If you see the prices of essential goods, very rooted, very fundamental goods which we consume, very often state controls them because if the prices are allowed to be determined by the market forces, they can be too high. Look, in the current scenario, we all complain that the prices of the grocery products have risen tremendously. I can have my own assumption that if there was no state control or state check on the prices of essential goods in Finland, it would have been even higher. So in many cases, look at the price of milk, look at the price of some basic things that we consume, eggs, I don't know, but milk I know. It hasn't really gone up considering the gravity of the situation. But if you look at the price of gasoline, it's almost doubled, isn't? Yeah. So when there's a comparison between the food you eat on daily basis, you can't survive without food, and the price of gasoline, so state knows where to control much and where not to control much. Okay? Does make sense? The second efficiency is called efficiency in consumption and efficiency in specialization and exchange. Efficiency in consumption is that when consumer allocates their expenditure to get the maximum utility, maximum satisfaction. You remember we have discussed that you people, everybody in this country, in this world, have limited amount of money. And we buy things. We buy things so that we can get the maximum satisfaction, maximum utility out of it. And this is the basis of law of diminishing marginal utility, I guess. That's what we discussed in length in the previous topic. The second topic is that, not topic, the point is that efficiency in specialization and exchange. And here it says that the firms specialize in certain things. Have you ever seen a car produced by Marks and Spencer? Have you ever seen a new line of furniture launched by Nokia? Have you? Why not? Have you seen, there's a lecturer, Shab, he was teaching biotechnology. Come on, I do sometimes in my dreams. Why so? Because there is a specialization and there is expertise. And then we exchange our expertise and our, what do you call as your niche you exchange. So not all the companies, not all the organizations, not all the individuals either are capable of doing everything. So we live in an era when there is no room for jack of all trades. So you can't do everything. So you have some education, you have some expertise, you have some background, and based on that, you perform those economic activities, whether you are an individual or you are an organization. So this specialization and division of labor is very important. And if I do something, if everybody start doing everything, then what will happen? This will also touch your productive efficiency. Why? Then the cost will go up. You get my point? If everybody is doing everything, every firm is doing everything, then the cost of production will also go up. So productive efficiency and allocative efficiencies, they are very much in sync. Macroeconomics, you know what is macroeconomics basically. What is macroeconomics, by the way? Micro, the opposite of micro is macro. Is science of aggregates, summation, addition. So when you are adding all the individuals, all the firms, all the industries, it becomes macroeconomic. Like I gave the example that if one person is saving, it may be good, but if everybody's saving, it means all the people are saving, then that can backfire, right? So it's very important that you understand that micro is the minutest unit of analysis and macro is the aggregate of people and firms. Example of macroeconomics, the fiscal policy. Those are the big decisions which the countries make, they are the macroeconomic decisions. The state of Finland make a decision to lower the tax rate. This will not only affect one company or one individual, this would affect people and organizations at large. Macro decision. Public expenditure. City of Uvascula have planned to open a new hospital which would be having state-of-the-art technology. Will it benefit one patient or maybe bulk of people living in and around Uvascula? Many people, I guess. It's a macro thing. Public borrowings. So fiscal policy is that policy in which state is very active in managing the affairs of the economy. Spending, borrowing, taxing, subsidizing. When I say tax, can you give me the example of negative tax? Subsidy is a negative tax. Because tax, if it is positive, it go from your pocket to the state. But tax, if negative, is coming from the state's pocket to you. So subsidy is nothing but a negative sign with tax, basically. Okay, so collectively, these measures, this is what the Ministry of Finance in every country does. And this is called fiscal policy, but we have a separate chapter on it. We will come back to it in more details. The second way, the second example of the macroeconomic policy is called monetary policy, but I will explain it to you when we meet after the break. I always took 4 minutes more. So let's meet at 11:20 something. All right. Thank you very much. So I pause the recording and then we meet in about 15 minutes. Yeah. All right. So before we met, before the break, we had some discussion about the monetary policy, right? We were talking about the micro and the macro variables. And oh, it doesn't show yet. Sorry, I was too early too. I think I need to wait. Oops, no. All right, so before the break, we were talking about very briefly about the macro policies. And for example, when you make your kitchen budget, it's also thinking the same mindset which the Minister of Finance would have, but it's a microeconomic thing. But when you do it for the entire country, for the entire state, then it becomes a macroeconomic thing. And we talk about the two major policies which we see with with our own eyes is the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. The fiscal policy is the policy where the state, the government, the politicians are very actively managing the economic affairs of the entire economy. Not all the minister, but the Ministry of Finance is very actively involved in taking care of the country's economic affairs. And how is it done? It's done through taxation. Tax is the one. Public expenditure is the second. Public borrowing is the third. And we also have this phenomenon called deficit financing. And very rarely, it's just a coincidence. It happened that the state's spending is 10 billion and the revenue is also 10 billion and there is zero. It's the budget is in the balance. The budget would be either in surplus or in deficit. The problem is that during the deficit, how to keep the accounts balanced. Then, as I said, there are many ways to do. The one way is that you can increase the taxes. and you can cut down the expenditure in the name of austerity, in the name of saving. I think we'll discuss this word austerity once. Then when you want to save money, basically. You can also increase the public borrowings from within the country or even beyond the country. By the way, the public borrowings is not only internal, it can also be external, and the public borrowings can also be, if I can use two more phrases, the public borrowings can be bilateral or it can be multilateral. So the public borrowings can also be bilateral or multilateral. The bilateral is that a country is having a deficit. Okay, I think I don't need to explain what deficit is. A country is having deficit and it approaches another country. Hey, I have the deficit, can you help me? And then, for example, let's say Mexico approaches the USA and it says that we are having a deficit. Can you help us? It asks the US Federal Reserve. They help them to fill the gap. If this is the case, if this is the borrowing, then this is called bilateral because it's between two countries. The other form of public borrowings could be another form of international public or the external public borrowing is called multilateral public borrowings. Here you approach those big organizations which exist in the world and which do not belong to one country. They belong to all the countries which are the member nations. And who are they? You can approach World Bank. Remember, World Bank is a very informal expression. The real name of World Bank is IBRD, which means International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. But its nickname is World Bank. It's known as World Bank. The other organization is called IMF, which is International Monetary Fund. Have you heard the name of these two bodies, IMF and World Bank? Have you or have you not? Okay. They both are global organizations. I think the biggest global financial institutions after UNO, is these two bodies. But what's the difference between the two? The difference is that IBRD is more from the developmental point of view. Let's say a country, a developing country asks World Bank, you know what, our women's situation is very bad. They don't have access to education. And because they don't have access to education, kids are either, they have some health issues or kids can't go to school. So the quality of education is very bad. And then the World Bank says, okay, we sanction you $5 billion. You can open, our experts will go there in your rural areas. They would have the hospitals, schools for kids, and special education for the moms so that they can also become economically aware and they become healthy and so on and so forth. This is more from the developmental point of view. The loans are almost with zero interest. And many times in the case-to-case basis, these loans are even waived. So these are not sometime in the loan, more like an aid or assistance. So there is an element of, what's the right word in English? Philanthropy. So you are going for a helping gesture. IMF does many things similar, but the approach is that IMF is more commercial. More commercial in the nature that they are giving more, they're giving money, but they're giving more in the form of loans, which you have to return. You get my point? So there is some element of generosity in the mission and vision of IBRDs, which is called World Bank popularly because the name is too big. whereas the IMF is more, is still a global organization. Almost every member of UNO is a member of IMF, but here the loan is given more on the commercial basis. It's more like a loan. Assistance is also there, but very minimal. Okay. Another organization which comes to my mind is very successful in Asia, and this organization must get the credit for transforming many countries in Asia. It's called ADB, which is Asian Development Bank, based in Manila. Yeah, I think the headquarters is in Manila. Yeah. And that has done marvelous job in many parts of Asia. And then if you want to see, we have the European Central Bank. We have the European Development Bank, sorry, not Central Bank, that is more from the monetary policy, but we have the European Development Bank. We also have some, and by the way, sometime we have a group of countries. Sometime you borrow not from one country, but from a collection of countries. Let's say you borrow from some EU fund, or you borrow from G8 group, or in many Asian countries, unfortunately, this organization hasn't been successful considering the political differences, but the BRICS was very popular once upon a time. Have you heard about BRICS? Have you or not? It's abbreviation for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So these are those developing countries which are not so small, they're massive. So they're not really developed countries, they're the big developing countries. Brazil is so big, Russia is massive, India has done a marvelous job in the recent past. China is an economic superpower. South Africa is a massive economy, massive market. So when you're not borrowing from one country, my purpose is not to give the explanation of these, but my purpose is that when you are borrowing from a certain group of countries, which are more informal, like BRICS, but more formal, like World Bank, right? Then it's called multilateral borrowings. Collectively, this is called fiscal policy. And fiscal policy is the policy where the state is super active in the economic matters, right? We also have, by the way, if you don't know, we have also one IFC. This is called International Financial Corporation. And International Financial Corporation is more like a club of countries and companies. So here, companies are also involved. So the big companies, the mega companies, right? They can also be the member of International Financial Corporation. So it can be that there is an arrangement between a country and a company. Let's say there is an arrangement between Guatemala and let's say Exxon Mobil, that Exxon would start some production capacities in Guatemala, but at the same time they would try to promote the local communities there as well. You see, in the modern world, I think I told you, some companies, rather many companies, are much bigger than many countries as well. You know, so that way, this is the fiscal policy. The state has two remote controls to run the economy. The one remote control is called fiscal policy, where the state is more active. But then the second remote control, which the state fine-tune the economy, but not so visibly. Instead, the state creates its own agent, which acts on its behalf with the rest of the economy. And that is called central bank of the country. So when the central bank of the country, like in Finland, we have Suomi Pankki. The oldest central bank is in our neighborhood in Sweden, Riksbank Bank. That is the oldest central bank in the world, followed by the Bank of England. In the US, there used to be one central bank, but then they split it into multiple federal banks. So if you look at the dollar, if you look at, for example, pound, it will say Bank of England at the bottom. But if you go to America, USA, you will not see the Federal Reserve Bank. It will say Federal Reserve System, FRS. So they don't have a bank, they have a system of banks. St. Lucia's, I mean, there are many banks which they have, which are taking care of the monetary matters. So point I'm trying to make is that policy which the state is running to fine tune the economy, but not so much coming itself showing too much of its face, but rather using the central bank of the country to run it, is called monetary policy. Monetary policy. Monetary policy is what? The monetary policy is that by changing the supply of money and by changing the rate of interest, you are able to control, or you are able to ensure that the long-term economic growth is achieved. Tell me one thing. If you are the Minister of Finance of a country, or even if you're Prime Minister of the country, what is your long-term agenda? What is your long-term economic agenda? Which are the economic ethos which you would never want to give up? Well, of course, there can be some variation in the short term, year-to-year basis, but what are your broad agendas? Yes, the lady at the back. You want stability in the economy. Very good. So, sorry, I think I can speak out, because when I go away, then the recording is affected. So the first is economic stability. Like a company, you don't want, a country doesn't want that its growth should go in zigzags, ups and downs, too much. You want economy to be stable. So stability in the economy is one of the foremost priority of a nation. What else? Well, efficiency is more at the operational level. The hint is that those are mentioned in the slide itself. If you try to search, you can't ignore them. Sorry? Economic growth, yes. So you want that there should be economic growth. You want economy to grow, right? Economic growth is very important. You want to reduce unemployment. One very important thing which I failed to mention, but actually it is there. Control the inflation. Control the inflation. So inflation control is very important. So these are some broad economic agendas of any country, whichever country you talk about. So you can implement this agenda with a fiscal policy by the state showing its face too much, or it can be via monetary policy in which not the Minister of Finance, but head of the central bank is giving more statements. And how they do it, the monetary policy. The monetary policy is the policy in which state achieves its economic agenda by changing the money supply and the cost of money supply. Money supply, we all know, is what? It's like your currency, coins, deposits, the bonds issued by the state. The cost of money supply, in simple words, is called the bank interest rate. The bank interest rate is the cost of money supply. If you think, if you are the head of the central bank of Finland, and you find that inflation is touching too much, what would you do with your rate of interest? Then the rate of interest will go up. Because then you want to discourage people from borrowing too much, because already there is a lot of inflation. On the contrary, if your economy is going downwards, there is a recession there, people are getting unemployed, then what would you do with the rate of interest? You'll put it down so that people borrow. When they borrow, they invest. When they invest, they give jobs. When people get jobs, their living standards improve and the economic recovery starts. You get my point? So therefore, when there's inflation, actual or potential, there's a high chance that the interest rates will go up. But during the recession time, when there is a economy is in downswing, then definitely the Minister of Finance would consider lowering the rate of interest. Haven't we become so used to of lower interest rate? I think many of you were born, even at that time, the interest rates were nearly negative. I think many of you have seen the rising interest rate first time in your lifetime. Because for the last 20 plus years, the rate of interests have been very, very low. Low or very low. And even lower, if I look at the Japanese economy, for the last 30 plus years, their interest rates are very low, somewhat negative. All right. So when you want to combat the recession, you are reducing the rate of interest. But when you want to combat the rising inflation, you increase the interest rate. Look, imagine the current situation. There is a rising inflation, okay? This is very interesting. And let's say Minister of Finance of Finland and the head of the central bank, Suomi Pankki of Finland, they meet together. What will they discuss? What will they discuss over a drink or so to combat inflation? Minister of Finance will say, what will Minister of Finance will say about this thing? Should we raise the tax? Or should we cut the tax? The problem is that if we cut the tax, people will have more money, disposable income, right? When people have more money, they will go to store. Already there is a shortage of goods in the store. And with the more pressure of demand, the price will go up. So inflation will go up. So what should we do then? Isn't it a good idea to raise the tax so that people have only that much income that they just go enough, they just have, I know it sounds a bit draconian, but don't think from very emotional or moralistic point of view, think from purely technical point of view. There are people who have to solve the problem. I mean, the doctors cannot be emotional. If they get emotional, they can never perform surgery. They have to take some bold action for the right or wrong reasons. So you agree that the Minister of Finance would say that to cut the inflation, or at least to manage the inflation, we need to put the taxes up, because the lowering of taxes can give more money to people, and then they will go to shops, and then they will create more inflation. Yes. Please remember that there is no guarantee that by doing so, you'll be successful. It's just an operation, like the doctor performed the surgery, because the surgery has to be done. There's no guarantee that the patient would be fully fit. But just because you are scared of the reaction of the patient and you don't perform the surgery, and you think very emotionally, you are very sensitive, and you are in the operation theater and your hands are shivering, well, you will definitely kill the patient by cutting the wrong vein or something. Hmm.
Short period of time,
Yeah.
and then they get used to it.
They become used to it. Yeah, that's true. That's true. You see what the states are very clever. What they do, they increase the price and they give you this kind of feeling that, hey, this is a temporary increase in the price. But believe me, the price never go back. Now we are paying more than €2 for a liter of gasoline, right? Even when the things will get better, you think the price will fall? We'll be so accustomed of paying €2 for a liter that there would be some slash, but not coming back to €1.20. I wish, but I know it will never happen. What would be the thought when the Minister of Finance says that I am going to increase the tax rate to combat inflation? What would be said by the head of the Central Bank of Finland? What would he say? Well, he would say, I am considering increasing the rate of interest to go up. So people are discouraged to borrow, because if the interest is low, they will borrow more. When they borrow more, there'll be more money supply circulation, and more money supply circulation means they would demand more goods, and this would put pressure on the prices. So I'm planning to raise the interest rate. Both people, one is a politician, the other is a professional, other is a technocrat. He must be some PhD in finance, and the other guy is a politician. They both are talking same thing, but basically they all have a different mechanism. One is controlling, going by the tax, and the other is by the rate of interest. Usually, the impact of monetary policy is much quicker. Much quicker. Taxation, changing the taxes, implementation of taxes, it takes a while, because remember, if the minister is planning to take a decision, he has to talk to his colleagues, prime minister, and then there's a discussion in the parliament and so on and so forth. But because the Bank of Finland or any bank, central bank, is more an autonomous body, then the decision making is much quicker in the monetary policy in comparison to the fiscal policy. So you were going to say something? Yeah? So when there's some political development, when the inflation is caused by some political reasons, war, these kind of things, then the supply chain is totally disturbed. And the supply chain is already disturbed. Remember, COVID-19, already we were grappling with. It hasn't gone yet. And then we were already struggling with the supply chain, how the resources come because of those restrictions and so on and so forth. Health and hygiene. We are more careful about that. Those products which come from certain parts of the world, we are more with the suspicion. And now we were just thinking about that. Things were getting better. And then we have this war next door. So the supply chain is fully disrupted. And the retail people are very clever. Remember, they are the profit-making organizations. The state can put some restrictions that you cannot increase the price of the essential goods much. You can't double the milk price. You can't double the egg prices. You can't double the vegetable prices. But what they do, they follow state's instructions, but those things which state is a little bit silent, they increase the prices. They say, all right, now it's more, you see, we are buying expensive from Germany and selling cheaper to the people because state wants us to do so. What should we do? All right, then raise the price of alcohol, raise the price of these other things. So they know, they have a portfolio. So when they find pressure in one or two products, they release it by charging more prices from the other products. So it's like they play the jigsaw game. Can I ask you, do you want a country or a system Okay, first of all, tell me, if you have a choice between the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, which one you prefer? You can't replace, by the way. You see, in America, in the typical capitalist countries, the fiscal policy is very less because state is not very active in the economic affairs, but the bank is very active. The monetary policy is very active. And by the way, the guy who won the Nobel Prize in economics a day before yesterday, Ben Bernanke, he was the head of the Federal Reserve System for many years. Not long ago, maybe some 10 years ago, he retired, Ben Bernanke, and he was the head of central bank of Federal Reserve System of the US. He works for MIT. Mostly the heads of the central banks in America, they continue to also work in the university as a professor of finance or economics. He did about his research is about banking crisis and how to manage it. But anyways, in the more capitalistic countries, fiscal policy is a little bit behind in the back door, and the monetary policy is more visible. Whereas in Europe and Asia and other parts of the world, fiscal policy is very prominent. I mean, imagine a developing country without fiscal policy or with less emphasis on the fiscal policy. State is so active in the economic affairs, they do everything. So which one you prefer? And where you see the problem? On the one hand, the state is running the show more openly. In the second case, the state is a bit shy, but the representative of the state is more, because bank is also in line with the government. It's very rare that the government and the bank, they have a clash. Here, the bank is more in the forefront in the monetary policy. Which one you prefer? Would you like to join a Ministry of Finance, or would you like to join the Central Bank of Finland as an executive? Which one you prefer? I agree with you, but if you see more from the general point of view, imagine, let's say public expenditure. The central government of Finland decide that we want to open 10 new great, really fantastic hospitals. We don't know the impact until they're completed and the patients start going there. Maybe some hospitals, their performance is really good, some are not. Maybe in some cities, they have made a wrong choice of selecting the location of those hospitals. They're too far away. People still go to dispensary than to this hospital. So we have a delay in seeing the impact. But whereas in the monetary policy, if you increase the interest rate, the impact would be felt more quickly. That's what of course, there can be exceptions. So this is what you know so far, that micro, macro. Macro is broader. The question is, what is macro in the real life? Well, this is the macro economy in the real life. Inflation, interest rate, public expenditure, public borrowing, taxation, these are macroeconomic phenomenon. It doesn't affect one person, it doesn't affect one company, but it affects economy at large. This was my message for today, that we need to know that economy, economics, then what next? Well, then we need to know micro, macro, fiscal, monetary, and so on and so forth. But next week, the week following, when we meet, we come back to micro again, and we will study the backbone of capitalism called price mechanism. Okay, once we know that, then we will be having certain minimum layer of knowledge, and then we will study some more advanced topics, like we'll come back to central bank, we'll come back to fiscal policy, but more in details. Okay, thank you very much for your patience, and have a lovely weekend, and have a fantastic week of holidays. Enjoy yourself. Thank you very much.